And since it's Tisha B'Av, as I proposed to Margot earlier this week, I wanted to focus on something else, not the Tanya. It's interesting because, and by the way, we should bottle this and sell it because it could save a lot of people and you could make a lot of money. But King David promises that Torah Hashem temimah mishivat nafesh and pekudei Hashem yesharim mesamechei lev. If you look at Psalm 19, it says that the Torah soothes the soul. Torah brings some sense of calmness to a person. So all those suffering from all sorts of anxieties, maybe learning Torah can help you. And Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamechei Lev, the commandments of God are not only honest and filled with integrity, but they also rejoice the heart. Mesamechei Lev, they rejoice the heart. And therefore, on Tisha B'Av, at least until midday today, which is at 12:33, I believe, here in Scottsdale, one should only study the parts of the Torah. The commandment to study the Torah is a commandment that applies 24/7. V'yigita bo yomam v'layla, it says that one should study Torah day and night. So that commandment doesn't go away. Tisha B'Av, nothing can remove that commandment. But we can channel that commandment towards the part of the Torah that are not too rejoicing or soothing. And those are the parts of our tragedies. And therefore, until midday on Tisha B'Av, we do not study the Tanya. We do not study even the 5 books of Moses, unless we study those parts that speak about the tragedies. And we rather focus on the historic times that we mourn on Tisha B'Av, which relate to the destruction of both temples and other tragedies. So I suggest, and I will share my screen, I suggested to Margot a few days ago that, yes, we continue to study, because that commandment, as we just said, applies 24/7. But as the sages teach, we should study the parts that deal with the destruction so that they don't bring us too much happiness, as is promised by King David. So I want to focus with you on the parts of the story of the destruction of the Second Temple as told in Tractate Gittin in the Babylonian Talmud. And for that, I'm going to share my screen, and I hope I have everyone's permission here to do so. But we really don't have much choice here on Tisha B'Av. So instead of Tanya, we'll focus on this, and I'm going to share my screen again with these Talmudic parts that speak about what led to the destruction of the Second Temple. And I think they have many, many lessons that we ought to draw from, especially nowadays. Okay, so, right, there we go. Okay. You can see, everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's focus on this. Again, this is a story that is deeply disturbing, as you'll see, a story that has become quite famous too, and a story that the sages teach is what led to the eventual destruction of the Second Temple, which also signifies the beginning of the exile of the Jewish people for 2,000 years. Does anyone want to read? Because of KAMTZA and Bar KAMTZA, right here at the top. Does anyone want to read?
I'll read it if nobody else wants to.
Go for it.
Okay. Because of KAMTZA and Bar KAMTZA, Jerusalem was destroyed. It happened this way. A certain man had a friend named KAMTZA and an enemy called Bar KAMTZA. He once made a party and said to his servant, "Go and bring KAMTZA." The man went and brought Bar KAMTZA.
Right, so he went and he brought his enemy instead of his friend, right? Okay, go for it.
When the man who gave the party found Bar KAMTZA there, he said, "See, you are my enemy. What are you doing here? Get out." Said the other, "Since I am already here, let me stay, and I will pay you whatever I eat and drink." Said the host, "Absolutely not. Then let me give you half the cost of the party." The host refused. "Then let me pay for the whole party." Still the host refused and took him by the hand and threw him out. Said Bar KAMTZA, "Since the rabbis were sitting there and did not stop him, this shows that they agreed with him. I will go and inform against them to the government."
Okay, stop there for a second. So that's the story, right? And then we'll see what happened with Bar KAMTZA, who was so upset that he was kicked out of this party. But it's quite interesting because, this was a big party that this host, an anonymous host, we don't exactly know who it is, but this host had, and he is offered by his enemy. You ended up there by mistake because the servant of this host invited him by mistake. He's offered that his entire meal will be paid, right? If someone is invited to your bar mitzvah and you don't want him there, to your wedding and you don't want him there, and he says, I'll pay for the whole thing, just let me stay and not be humiliated. I'm sure 99% of you will say, oh, if that's the offer, of course I'll let you stay. But not the case. This is how deep this hatred was. It wasn't just, oh, I don't like this guy. That's how deep the hatred was. How can you have such hatred? I don't know. But that comes to reflect again the one of the biggest problems here. Another problem, as we spoke about, as Talmud speaks about, is that the rabbis were quiet. It's not just the rabbis. The rabbis are held to higher standards. I understand why the Talmud is picking on the rabbis. But everyone who was at the party, everyone at least who was around Bar Kamtza being kicked out, stayed quiet. They didn't say anything, which really teaches us another lesson. That is that when bad happens, even if it's uncomfortable to speak out against it, you should still speak out against it. It's not just a biblical commandment. In Leviticus 19, where it says that Lo ta'amod al dam recha, you should not stand idly by the blood of your brother, but it's also a commandment that, if not fulfilled, enables evil to happen. So we become really uh, we become enablers of evil by staying silent. It's interesting. I'll just share a midrash, but it's a fascinating midrash too that speaks about that tries to understand, just like we're trying to do now, trying to understand why the temple was destroyed. But this is a midrash that tries to understand why Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, were punished in such a cruel way that two lines of fire came down from the heavens during the inauguration of the tabernacle, and they died. And they entered the nostrils of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of the high priest, right, the nephews of Moses, and they died. So the Talmud is grappling with this story, trying to understand why did they deserve this death? Can we understand why? And one of the theories that is offered is that one day Nadav and Avihu were walking in the desert, and as they were situated, the Jews had a very clear pattern on how to walk in the desert. For example, the tribe of Dan was the very last tribe. The tribe of Judah was the very first tribe. But even before the tribe of Judah, there were the priests. And even before the priest were the VIPs of the priest, which was the family of Aaron. So they were pretty close to Moses, the family of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, who were killed, were pretty close to Moses as they walked in the desert. And one day, as they were walking in the desert, Nadav and Avihu are looking right in front of them, Moses leading the way. And Nadav says to Avihu, when will this old man die and we'll take his place? When God heard that, God exclaimed from the heavens, we will see who will die before who. Mm. And this is why Nadav and Avihu, or one of the theories at least, of why Nadav and Avihu died at an early age, of course, before Moses. Now, the question that is asked is that Nadav is the one who said to Avihu, when will this man die and will take his place? Avihu didn't say anything. But that's exactly the point. He should have said something. He should have protested. He should have said, Nadav, you can't talk like this. And when you don't protest, you become a part of the evil that is happening. You become an enabler to it. Same here. No one spoke up. So they become a part of that evil. In the laws of Lashon Hara, which are laws that should be studied on Tisha B'Av too, because a lot of this hatred comes from gossip that spreads so widely and uncontrollably and destroys lives. But in the laws of Lashon Hara, it's not just the speaker of Lashon Hara that sins. It's also the listener of Lashon Hara. If you're listening to Lashon Hara, someone comes and gossips and insults someone in your ears, if you don't protest, you are part of that sin of Lashon Hara, of gossiping, of insulting. You are part of the destruction of a life. Because you should protest. You should say, hey, you can't speak like this, and it's not true. So the rabbis sitting there not stopping is also a big factor here in the story that led to the destruction of the Second Temple. By the way, I welcome all comments and ideas. So if you have anything that you want to add to this, I just want to dig deeper and not just take the words at face value. I'm happy to hear, we're all happy to hear your comments. Yes, Amy, please. But you got to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Good morning.
Good
Okay.
morning. Good morning.
Yeah. So, situation, this actually happened and to me just recently, and it
Mm-hmm.
involved um people at the shul.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke out,
Mm.
but in the situation of speaking out, I was also yes, I was curtailing evil coming from the lips of somebody else, but in the process of doing that, I was also embarrassing the person who is speaking evil.
Mm.
And part of Lashon Hara is to never embarrass somebody in public. So can you speak to that, please?
That's an excellent question. Because you protested, the person was embarrassed. Oh, shouldn't have spoken like this, or right? I feel bad now. So of course you have to do it tactfully. You have to try and do it tactfully and as in the smoothest, most loving way as
I
possible.
did. I did. Yes.
Good, good. But in a case like this, and the Chafetz Chaim, who wrote the book of Lashon Hara, by the way, his nickname was Chafetz Chaim. His real name was Rabbi Yisrael Kagan. Chafetz Chaim, I'm deviating a little bit. I'm going to get to your question, but Chafetz Chaim was a book that he wrote on Lashon Hara, on all the different laws, and he speaks to your question. But he named the book Chafetz Chaim because it also comes from the book of Psalms in the 30s. I don't exactly remember which chapter, but it says, Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirotov, who is chafetz chaim, a person who desires life and wants and loves days to see good. Netzor leshoncha mera usfatecha midaber mirma. That person who desires life and will be gifted with the gift of life is a person that keeps his tongue from speaking bad and his lips from speaking um, destruction. And that's why he called the book Chafetz Chaim. But he talks about that, and he says very clearly that it's better to embarrass that person and stop that fire from spreading than having that fire spread and destroy countless lives. Now, of course, you got to do it. You got to do it tactfully, right?
Yes. Yes.
But you got to stop the fire from spreading. That fire could be very destructive. You
Good.
If I
know,
if I if I could add something,
go ahead, William, please.
the rabbi in the Talmud asks, "Do you know why our fingers are like studs?" And the answer is so that you could put your finger in your ear
That's
when
it.
you hear Lashon Hara.
That's right. Very good. And
That's
that
great.
same Talmudic, beautiful. That same Talmudic, that same Talmudic um, statement says, and William, I'm glad you brought it, that it's interesting because God made the ear very flexible, unlike any part of the body, right? Besides the fingers that you just said, but any part of the body is not as flexible as movable, right? As the ear. And why did God create the ear like that? And the answer the Talmud says is because if you hear something bad, Lashon Hara, you should be taking your ear and blocking blocking it so that you don't hear anything bad. But that's it. But Amy, to answer your question, then we'll continue with the Talmud or with any other comments that people have here. But it's almost like being in a forest. And as we know, in forest, particularly, fires can spread very, very quickly. And you're in the forest and you saw someone throw a cigarette and you saw that cigarette taking off or the fire of a cigarette taking off and you there. God placed you there. Now you have a choice. Should you just ignore the fire or should you try and extinguish the fire even if it will hurt you a little bit? And obviously, the choice
Yeah.
that you should take is to extinguish the fire even if it hurts you or even someone else a little bit. Because if the fire is to extend, the whole forest will burn down, and who's to tell the destruction it can cause? So in cases like that, it's yeah, you have to do it tactfully, But if you end up hurting yourself a little bit or hurting the other a little bit, doesn't matter. You saved a forest from a fire.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now Bar Kamtza is deeply, deeply hurt by the factors that we spoke about and maybe other factors. And he says, okay, these Jews have to be punished for what they did. How can I punish them? I'm going to go to the Emperor of Rome and I'm going to tell the Emperor of Rome that they are rebelling against you. And surely the Emperor of Rome then will take his revenge on my behalf. Now, yeah, we see, before we read the rest of the story, yeah, we see yet a third factor. And that factor is now on Bar Kamtza's shoulders. Yes, he was hurt. Yes, no one spoke out against the evil that was being done to him. But still, he kept a grudge. Not only did he keep a grudge, but he kept a grudge and he wanted to exercise revenge with that grudge. That in of itself also is what eventually caused, as you'll see, the destruction of the temple. That also is one of the great destructive factors of society. We have to be able to let go. There's a prayer that we say, we've spoken about it every single evening before we go to sleep. That I forgive and let go of any grudge or any hurt that I may have experienced throughout the day. Because if you live with grudges and revenge, that destroys you and it can destroy societies too. So here's another subtle lesson here in the words of the Talmud. Okay, let's continue. So, said Bar Kamtza, let's continue where you were, yeah, Marga, I think,
Okay,
right? Said Bar Kamtza. I'm just gonna.
said Bar Kamsa, since the rabbis were sitting there and did not stop him, this shows that they agreed with him. I will go and inform against them to the government. He went and said to the emperor, the Jews are rebelling against you. Said the emperor, how can I know that this is true? Send them an offering, said Bar Kamsa, and see whether they will offer it on the altar. So he sent him with a fine calf. While on the way, he made a blemish on its upper lip, or some say on the white of its eye, in a place where we counted a blemish, but they do not. Rabbis were inclined to offer it in order not to offend the government. Said Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas to them, people will say that blemished animals are offered on the altar. They then proposed to kill Bar Kamsa so that he should not go and inform against them. But Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas said to them, is one who makes a blemish on a consecrated animals to be put to death? Rabbi Yochanan thereupon remarked, because of the scrupulousness of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas, our house has been destroyed, our temple burnt, and ourselves exiled from our land.
Right. Okay, that's the end of the Bar Kamtza story. But there are many other subtle statements here which are stunning to me. First of all, where were the rabbis or where were the people in the party? They seeing now that Bar Kamtza is trying to exercise revenge. You're seeing that this destruction can cause really a destruction of a people and the exile of a people. Why aren't you what you and you thinking to kill Bar Kamtza and then propose to kill Bar Kamtza instead of owning it? Instead of going to Bar Kamtza and saying, let's make peace? We're so sorry for what happened. Yes, now Bar Kamtza also is at fault a little bit because he's holding this grudge and he's not letting go. And look how much destruction to the person himself this grudges can make, right? They say that hatred hurts the hater the most, or grudges hurt the person that are holding them the most. But uh, but still, the rabbis could have very easily sought peace. That's really one of the foundational teachings of Judaism. Be like the students of Aaron. You should love peace and pursue peace. But there's no attempt to that, at least based on the story, at all. And then another factor, and again, I'd love to hear your things, but these are all lessons, pure lessons to learn from. Especially, I would say nowadays, when with the click of the mouse, or it's not a mouse anymore, with the click of the computer, mouses we got rid of, or the click of the phone, you can spread this lashon hara, this fire, so quickly, and no one takes ownership of anything anymore, and people keep grudges all the time. It's just unbelievable how much this speaks to our day and age. But Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas is yet another factor in this destruction. Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas obviously was a rabbi that the other rabbis looked up to, and he could make decisions that they had to listen to. And he says, well, let's not accept the sacrifice. If they had accepted the sacrifice, it would have proven to the governor that the Jews are not rebelling, and therefore it wouldn't have brought about this destruction. But because he's so scrupulous, or he's so small-minded, narrow-minded, he's walking around with these blinds and only looking at the law, not the context of the law, not the question behind the question, as we've spoken about before in the past, then that also contributed to the destruction, to the snowball that kept rolling. Which also teaches us yet another lesson, that before you make decisions, before you judge, maybe you should look at the whole story, not just say, oh, okay, yes, he's wrong because he did this. Well, maybe he did this because of something much deeper. It's interesting, but the word in Hebrew for violence, alimut, or someone that's violent, alim, is the exact same word as the word for mute. Ilem, Aleph Lamed Mem is the root word. Why is being mute violent? Or why is violence connected to muteness? And the answer is because this refers to bullies. You know why bullies are bullies very often? Because they've been muted inside. They have such deep wounds that they can't relate to them. They mute those wounds. Just if they would relate to them, it would drive them crazy. They're not emotionally equipped to deal with them. But it bothers them deeply, maybe from previous traumas. So they mute those wounds, but it still bothers them. So how do they deal with them? By becoming bullies, by exercising violence. Because again, there's something deep inside that they don't know what it is, and they have to turn their hurt into hurt of others. That's the deeper reason of bullies, of violence, that people mute their traumas instead of dealing with them. It's true. It's true very often. We see that with other parts. I'm not going to go into psychology, but still, people that have certain destructive habits, it's very often because they themselves suffered from others with those destructive habits. They don't know how to deal with them, so they are muted emotionally, and they then become destructive themselves. If they were to open up that mute and deal with those traumas, then they could start healing themselves. But that's the deeper idea here. Now, Tzchar ben Avkulos is a person who only looks at the destructive behavior. Oh, this guy's destructive, so let's just punish him. Or let's not look at the big context. This animal is blemished, we're not going to accept it. What about the fact that this is going to bring about the destruction of the people, the destruction of your people? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm following the law. So that's yet
Rabbi,
another factor. Yes,
Rabbi, I would say this story is symbolic of what happened in Jerusalem, where you have the zealots killing people who don't support them, burning the food that they had stored to punish them. It's a symbolic story. It's not the actual reason why Jerusalem was destroyed. It was destroyed because of infighting and political and
right,
geopolitical. This is just I don't know what the word. It just to explain at the lowest level how destructive behavior could cause such a catastrophe. But
very good.
it's
Right,
just it's not the reason
right.
Jerusalem got destroyed because the guy was not happy at a
Right.
party.
Absolutely. Or what you're saying is let's not be like Scharib and Avkulos and just look at that story, right? That wasn't the reason. It's all that is underlying in the story that was the reason. Again, and let's repeat and maybe summarize through that so that we can learn from this, to not be that ourselves and maybe even to spread that message to others. But number one, it was this hatred towards Bar Kamtza himself. He wasn't invited to the party. Such deep hatred that it took over the person. He couldn't celebrate because of this hatred when he saw this man at his party. And it was so deep that he kicked him out, even though he was offered that his whole party would be paid by him. That's number one. Number two, we also spoke about the silence of the rabbis and others. Being silent when evil happens makes you an enabler of that evil. Number three, we also spoke about how the rabbis didn't even seek peace. Okay, so the Bar KAMTZA is on this vengeful journey. Seek peace, nothing. Then it was Bar KAMTZA a little bit. These grudges, not being able to let go, this revenge that also takes over you and eventually your own people too. That also is a lesson that we ought to learn. Then Rabbi Chaim ben Avkulos, who doesn't see, he sees, the message, not the messenger, or the question, not the question behind the question. That of its in and of itself also, and then many many other lessons here too that we ought to take to heart, especially on a day like this of Tisha B'av. And I would say that the ultimate lessons to take with us is to do the exact opposite. Instead of unconditional hatred, have unconditional love. Instead of being silent in the face of evil, stand up for truth. And instead of looking just at the narrow-mindedness of a situation, look at the whole context and learn to find the good, even in the negative. Expand your mind, expand your vision altogether. And other lessons, again, that we ought to take from this on this special day.